Pentagon. I was in charge of the search and rescue operations that we started while the building was still burning. But we had a little bit of a clue that something was happening because we were working at the firehouse that day. And a couple of wives called and said, a plane crashed into the towers. And there had been a couple of close calls recently there, but really nobody thought it was going to be a jetliner. We turned the news on like everybody else, and we knew it was more than just a Cessna that flew into the tower. And while we were watching, we watched the second plane fly in. We realized that as a nation, we were under attack. During that time period, while we were watching that, we heard chatter on our radio, Northern Virginia channel, that there's a fire at the Pentagon. We kind of discounted it because that's a routine thing there. But we started hearing more and more requests for companies going into the Pentagon. And then we realized that the Pentagon had also been struck. It seems like when you're standing here talking about it that the time gets compressed. And I feel like after 22 years, the time is still compressed. Because to me, it just happened. How many of you here are under 22? I'm glad a bunch of you raised your hand because I was starting to feel, but hard to believe, isn't it, that this happened after you were born. This year, those who were born in 2001 are graduating college. How did that happen? So, as history, this day becomes part of history, it's important that we have ceremonies like this to remember. Because it helps educate those who never knew. They have no memories of it because they weren't around or they were too young to remember. So today, being here right now is very important, not just to me, but to the memories of those that made that ultimate sacrifice that day. And the chief mentioned something about the guys going into the building at the World Trade Center. Every one of them knew that they probably weren't coming back. I have a friend, he was captain of Rescue 1, Terry Hatton. Terry was the ultimate fireman. Being the captain of Rescue 1 is one of the most prestigious jobs in the FDM line. Another friend of ours, a guy named Tim Brown, the fireman in another company, he saw Terry in the lobby. Terry went over and gave him a hug and said, "It's good knowing you." He took 11 other firefighters from Rescue 1 up into the tower. None of them ever returned. So it's important to remember the actions that these firefighters and police officers made that ultimate sacrifice that day, willingly and knowing that they were about to make the ultimate sacrifice. And yet still they went up and rescued almost 25,000 people. Those are impressive numbers when you look at a numbers game. The Coast Guard played a major role that morning as well, the evacuation. Some say since the largest sea evacuation since Dunkirk. Over 1,000 boats removing people from lower Manhattan. What makes America great? You do. You're willing to dedicate your service, your time, your lives. I want to quote James Croker, the fire chief of New York City, 1899. The bravest action that a firefighter does is put the uniform on. All other actions are in the course of duty. Goes as well for our law enforcement brothers and our military brothers as well, and sisters. So, when we talk about sacrifice and commitment, we need to do more. When you go home today, take some time and read some of the statements that the survivors make. Understand what their history is. Understand who they are today. Don't let this moment right now be the only thing that you do for 9/11. As important as Pearl Harbor was, this event is almost as important in the history of the United States. It's the largest attack on the mainland of the United States in our history. So please remember, if we forget, we will allow history to repeat itself. Thank all of you for being here. I'm proud to be with you.
Thank you, Mike.